Remember those scenes? This week marks the 9th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. It was an invasion that quickly toppled longtime dictator Saddam Hussein. But the insurgency that followed killed nearly 5,000 Allied troops, and Iraqi death toll estimates run well more than 100,000 people. Millions were forced from their homes. The anniversary brought even more violence. A series of car bombings on Tuesday killed some 40 people. U.S. troops have now pulled out of Iraq, of course. So what kind of enduring lessons can the U.S. and, for that matter, the rest of the world take away from the invasion and the aftermath? Stephen Walt lays out his top 10 lessons from the Iraq War in an editorial for foreignpolicy.com. He's a professor of international affairs at Harvard University. We started by asking the professor about lesson number 1. America lost. Why?
First of all, we didn't get out on schedule. The original expectation was that the United States might be there for a few months, and then we would leave a stable pro-American democracy there. You'll recall we also went into Iraq believing there were weapons of mass destruction there, and of course there weren't. In fact, the United States ended up being there for 9 years. We spent over $1 trillion. We lost 4,500 American soldiers and probably about 30,000 wounded. And what we got from that was not a democracy. It's a sort of quasi-democracy that is heading in more authoritarian directions. And we also helped shift the balance of power in the Persian Gulf in favor of Iran. By any stretch of the imagination, this doesn't look like a victory.
You also say that what we learned is very easy to hijack America into war. The marketplace of ideas seems to evaporate.
That's right. I mean, if you look back at how we got into the war, it was engineered by a relatively small number of people inside the Bush administration and a few cheerleaders outside, and there was remarkably little public debate. The Democratic Party was largely absent without leave, unwilling to question President Bush in the aftermath of 9/11. So not only did we not debate the wisdom of actually going into Iraq, but we didn't do a very good job of planning for what we might find there. Anybody who questioned it tended to be marginalized. As a result, we not only made a foolish decision to go in, but we weren't ready for what we found.
One of the most significant things that has come out of this has been the shock, in most cases, when Americans see their young men and women who are now accused of war crimes, who are guilty of gross violations of human rights and other abuses.
Right, and a lesson we should learn from this is when we find ourselves in counterinsurgency wars, these are never pretty. They are the kinds of conflict that are incredibly hard on an army. They're long, they're protracted. You're facing a local population whose loyalties and affinities are hard to tell, and that means that excesses are bound to happen, not because American soldiers are inherently evil, but because it places them in extraordinarily difficult circumstances. American leaders have to understand when they start moving in that direction, they are opening Pandora's box, and these kinds of abuses are almost certain to happen sooner or later.
As you round out your top 10 lessons from the Iraq War, you say better planning just is not going to work. Why?
Because these are inherently difficult activities. Nation building in a foreign society is perhaps the most complicated, difficult, challenging thing any country can take on, particularly when the country is divided, relatively poor, and when we don't understand it very well. So if you don't make one mistake, you're bound to make another one, and almost any of the remedies that look like they might have helped in, with hindsight, might have led to simply a different set of problems. If we'd had more troops, we couldn't have kept them there for long enough to wage the war. In short, this is the kind of thing that is likely to fail far more often than it's going to succeed, and the real lesson to draw is to not get into wars like this in the future.